Hey folks, all right, so next up is a multi-part series on rain harvesting. So part one is going to be me laying out the pad for our tanks. We have two 2,500 gallon tanks coming, and we're going to collect rainwater from the gutters that we have there with multiple pre-filters in place. Going to use leaf eater, downspouts, and then a first flush system to get to pre-filter, and then we're going to dump it into the tanks, and then we're going to go from the tanks to a pump, and from a pump to a pressure tank, and then pressure tank to the garden and the yard for watering, and potentially connect that to the house. So I'm just going to throw this on time lapse and let you see what I'm going to do next, which is I'm going to lay out the pad. So I'm going to get everything level using a rotary laser, a grading rod, and an infrared receiver so that we can make sure that the pad is level. So let's do it. All right, folks, so we got everything level. We've got our marks on the stakes. These black marks on the stakes are going to tell us where we need to bring the dirt to. And then from there, we'll put some edging, some 6x6s, and then probably some pea gravel on the top. But let me explain how I got to those black marks. So step one is you have to have a starting point. So the starting point for us is this stake over here. I marked a black line on the stake. That's where I need to bring grade to. Step one. So the next thing I did is I got the leveling, the laser level, rotary laser, grading rod, and infrared receiver, and I set the laser up, and then I shot and measured the distance between the ground and where the laser was. In that case, for that stake, it was measuring at 32.5. So from the ground to where the laser was, it was 32.5 inches. Hopefully I'll put a graphic over here. So the next step is you need to measure how far from the ground that black mark is. Okay? So that black mark is 2.5 inches from the ground. So what that does for us is after we go to each one of these stakes and measure the distance from the ground to where the laser is, so we're all on an even plane, we know the distance from the ground to the laser at all these marks, then we can figure out where we need to place our mark on the corner stakes. Okay, and we do that by using some basic subtraction. So the starting point, we had 32.5 inches at the height of the laser, and then we had 2.5 inches from the ground on the stake. So we need to know what this distance is right here, okay? And the reason we do that is because now, once we know that distance, then we can go to each one of the stakes and take that distance away from the total, and that gives us where the black mark should be. So in this case, it was 32.5 inches from the ground to the level, and then we had 2 inches, basically, you can't see that very well, 2 inches, 2.5 inches there. So that leaves us 30 inches from here to here, okay? So then we can go to this stake over here, and we know that this one was 37.5 inches. So we take 37.5 inches, we subtract 30 inches, and that gives us 7.5 inches from the ground to where we need to make our black mark. So it's hard to see on that stake over there, but that black mark is 7.5 inches from the ground. So we did that at each corner stake. So we'll then bring in some dirt. It's mostly clay, which is good because it compacts really well, and it lets water run off. It doesn't soak through. And then we'll get some pea gravel on top. So that'll be all included in part 1. So here we go. So all I'm doing here is adding material to build up our pad to the black lines we talked about earlier. You might find it a little strange that I'm driving back and forth, but that is actually helping to compact the material in between layers. And then lastly, we water it in. Okay folks, so next up on the rain harvesting project is finalizing the water tank pad. And to do that, we have to put some borders in place. We already have most of the material, which is soil and clay, in a rough shape of the pad, but now we have to put in borders around that so that we can help maintain the materials within the pad. So as rain comes down, it hits the tanks, and the tanks don't collect what hits on top of the tanks, it just runs down the sides. And what we want to do is prevent our materials from washing away. So we're going to do that with some borders around the tank pad, and today we're going to be using 6x6s to do that. And what we're also going to be doing is cutting out lap joints for these 6x6s. We're going to use lap joints to join the 6x6s at the corners and midspan so that they stay together well. We chose lap joints generally because they are a stronger joint than, say, just a butt joint. So that's what we're doing. We've got this one here already done, and I thought that it probably would be helpful to film that for you guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep going. I'm going to throw this into time lapse, and then I'm going to talk through why I'm doing what I'm doing to cut out these lap joints. And then there may be a better way, but what I'm doing is using a combination of a skill saw and a chainsaw, and I'll talk through that. So here we go. Here you can see I'm measuring out what section we'll be cutting out. Since we want material on each timber to be equal, we are measuring 2¼ inches into the 6x6 and then 5½ inches in from the end. This will allow each 6x6 a nice snug fit with each other. Next, I'm using a circular saw at the 2¼ mark on either side. This will act as both a guide for later cuts, and it will also help us remove the material we want to remove. Now I'm pulling out the chainsaw to help us get through the 6x6 quickly. Many do like to use a circular saw here, and that probably makes sense for applications where you need more precise cuts. Luckily for us, our application does not require that accuracy, so let's break out the chainsaw. Finally, we can get all the material out just by hitting it with our hammer and using a chisel to clean up the edges. Alright, so here I am going through the rinse and repeat process of getting the timbers level. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Once I get this one where I want it, I'll drive 2 3/8 inch by 2 foot pieces of rebar through the 6x6 and into the ground. This just helps to further secure the edging in place. I am joining the two 6x6s together using a 1/2 inch by 5 inch galvanized lag screw, and I am recessing it into the 6x6 so it looks a little cleaner. One thing to note here is that the top piece is drilled out with a larger hole to allow the screw to pull the two pieces together a little tighter. Oh, and yes, I did use a washer to allow the screw to spin easily when pulling the two pieces together.
Counting winners, it's right down the line. You'll be alright on sunny side. Lost in the city lights, ain't got nowhere to turn your winding wheel. There's always the sunny side across the river. Take a ride, take a swim, my friend, and paddle your guitar across the river. You'll be fine. Go counting winners right down the line. You'll be alright on the sunny side.
Okay folks, so as you saw and you can see now, we got all the timbers in, and to be quite honest, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, and I think the primary reason for that is because about, I don't know, a quarter of the way through, I realized, hey, why don't I just use my rotary laser and grading stick, and doing that made it go so much faster. Not that there's anything wrong with a masonry level, it just got a little, it was too much work. As you could see, I kind of struggled. It was move the timber, check the level, move the timber, take out some dirt, add some dirt, move the timber, check the level, rinse, repeat. That got a little old, and it's a little inefficient at best. So anyway, got the rotary laser out and the and just used that, and just went all the way around where the timbers were going to be before the timbers were put in, and that made it so much easier because you can tell by looking at the grading rod how much up or down you need, because at this short distance I could see the laser on the grading rod, so it was either a quarter to a half or an inch above or below where we needed it to be. So that makes it a whole lot easier to remove or add dirt than sort of guessing when you have the masonry level. Anyway, so next up is we're going to kind of get this all flattened out, and then we're going to add some pea gravel. And of course we'll water it in so it's nice and settled and compact. And then once we get that done, we'll move the tanks on, and then we'll hook up the tanks, and we'll hook up the pump and the pressure tank. But that's in the next video. So tune in to the next video, and please hit subscribe down there and the little bell. If you hit the bell, it will alert you when we get new videos in. And if there's anybody out there who has any comments about how I did this, how I could have been a little bit more efficient, or I could have done it better, please let me know, because I'm just doing what I think is best based on what I've been taught. So I'm always happy to learn new things. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, please hit subscribe, hit the little bell, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you guys.